Johnson, you're wearing your dress is way too high.
One of these singers was discovered singing inside a jail cell. One of them set a live television award on fire. Welcome back to the channel that goes back and digs deep. Today, 12 country singers from the 1970s who deserve way more credit than they ever got.
She said, I'd like to address this meeting off the Harper Valley.
Every story is true, verified, and stranger than you'd expect. Let's get into it.
Shove it. I ain't working here no more.
Number 12. Bill Anderson, City Lights.
Picture of a world that's gay and bright.
Bill Anderson wrote one of country music's biggest hits at just 19 years old while working the night shift as a small-town radio DJ. Anderson was a journalism student at the University of Georgia, spinning records at a tiny station in Commerce, Georgia, when he wrote City Lights, a moody honky-tonk tune about the loneliness of city nightlife. He had no real Nashville connections. He simply recorded it independently in San Antonio, Texas, in 1957, and somehow that recording found its way to legendary singer Ray Price. Price's version hit #1 on the country charts in 1958.
Just supposed to run and hide behind.
Anderson was signed to Decca Records within weeks. What made Anderson truly unforgettable, though, wasn't just his songwriting, it was his voice.
Behind those city lights.
Anderson sang in a soft, breathy, conversational style, speaking his lyrics as much as singing them, which earned him the nickname Whisperin' Bill.
The world was dark and God made stars.
His 1963 hit Still pushed that style even further, spending 7 weeks at #1, built almost entirely on spoken verses.
Lights that offer other girls for empty.
Over the following decades, Anderson became one of the most quietly essential songwriters in Nashville history, penning hits for Connie Smith, Lefty Frizzell, and Porter Wagoner, and later co-writing modern classics like Whiskey Lullaby with Brad Paisley. He remains the only songwriter in country music history to place a song on the charts in 7 consecutive decades. Whisperin' Bill never needed to shout. The industry heard him anyway.
Lights that say forget her name.
Number 11. Billie Jo Spears, Blanket on the Ground.
We'll go walking once again.
Billie Jo Spears nearly lost her voice completely before she ever became a star. In 1972, Spears underwent vocal cord surgery, so serious it threatened to end her singing career entirely. She'd already had one modest hit years earlier, Mr. Walker, It's All Over. But recovery from the surgery meant starting almost from scratch, rebuilding both her voice and her confidence under new producer Larry Butler. In 1975, that comeback paid off with Blanket on the Ground, a bold, playful song about a middle-aged married woman encouraging her husband to reconnect romantically, delivered with a directness that stood out sharply against the more traditional country songs of the era. It shot straight to #1 on the Billboard Country chart.
Lay the blanket on the ground.
Here's the part most American listeners never realized. Spears became a massive, enduring star overseas, particularly in the United Kingdom and Ireland, where she racked up hit after hit for years after her American chart success cooled off.
We can't slip around. So
She toured internationally well into the 1990s, beloved by audiences who never stopped requesting the song that rebuilt her career from a hospital bed. A voice that nearly went silent became one of country music's most durable international exports.
we couldn't wait for night to
Number 10. Gene Watson, Love in the Hot Afternoon.
From my window.
Gene Watson was repairing car doors in a Houston auto body shop when Capitol Records finally came calling. Watson never took a single vocal lesson in his life. He grew up singing in holiness churches in Texas, developed his voice entirely through instinct, and spent more than 10 years grinding through Houston honky-tonks at night, while supporting himself as a mechanic during the day.
The street vendor cried, Philly gumbo.
He recorded for small, independent regional labels for over a decade, with almost no national attention. In 1975, an independent recording of Love in the Hot Afternoon, a slow, sultry ballad, caught the attention of Capitol Records, who picked it up and released it nationally.
That she's just a girl, and
It climbed to number 3 on the country charts, introducing Watson's smooth, effortlessly rich baritone to a national audience for the very first time.
now I know.
What followed was a string of hits, including his eventual signature song, Farewell Party, and a reputation among fellow musicians as one of the purest, most naturally gifted vocalists the genre ever produced, sometimes called the singer's singer by his peers.
Then we came.
A title reserved for musicians whose talent other musicians recognize, even when mainstream fame doesn't fully catch up. Watson never chased Nashville. He stayed in Texas, kept doing auto body work as a hobby long after he didn't need the money, and let a decade of grinding turn into one of country music's most respected, if quietly underrated, careers.
Now I know.
If you're locked into this one, most people scrolling past these songs have no idea what it took to make them. We digs that history back up, one record at a time. The subscribe button costs nothing, and it means you won't miss the next one.
Number 9. Mel Tillis, I Ain't Never. Mel Tillis could barely speak a full sentence without stuttering, but the moment he started to sing, it vanished completely. Tillis developed his stutter after surviving a near-fatal bout of malaria at age 3, a condition that stayed with him his entire life. He didn't discover his strange exception to it until first grade. When a teacher had him sing solos in front of his class to build his confidence. I wasn't scared or tense whenever I sang, Tillis remembered decades later. I didn't stutter at all. Studio executives in early Nashville weren't interested in a stuttering performer, telling him bluntly they needed copyrights, not singers. So Tillis built his career backward, writing hit songs first for other artists, including Webb Pierce, Kenny Rogers, and Patsy Cline. Quietly becoming one of the most successful songwriters in Music City, before ever stepping into the spotlight himself. It was fellow Grand Ole Opry legend Minnie Pearl who finally pushed him to perform live and speak directly to audiences, despite his fear of being mocked. If they're going to laugh at you, she told him, give them something to laugh about. Tillis embraced that advice completely, building an entertainer's career around self-deprecating humor about his own stutter. By 1972, hits like I Ain't Never made him a true headliner in his own right. He'd go on to score dozens of top 10 hits, get inducted into both the Nashville Songwriters and Country Music Halls of Fame, and eventually receive the National Medal of Arts from a sitting U.S. president. Proof that the voice Nashville almost dismissed turned out to be one of its most enduring. Number 8. Jeannie C. Riley, Harper Valley PTA.
And she said, Mama got a note here from the Harper Valley PTA.
Jeannie C. Riley became the first woman in history to top both the pop and country charts at the same time, and her own manager told her, to her face, that she wasn't really an artist. Riley was working as a secretary at a Nashville music publishing company when producer Shelby Singleton picked her to record Harper Valley PTA. A story song written by Tom T. Hall about a widowed single mother who publicly humiliates a hypocritical school board. She recorded the entire vocal in just 2 takes, right after finishing her day job.
And we don't believe you ought to be bringing up your little girl this way.
The song exploded, selling over 1 million copies within 10 days. But almost immediately, Riley's own team began marketing her as if she were the miniskirt-wearing character from the song, despite the fact that, in the lyrics, that description actually belonged to the daughter, not the mother Riley was portraying.
She said, I'd like to address this meeting off the Harper Valley.
When Riley was nominated for a major industry award and requested a floor-length gown, Singleton had the designer cut it down to a mini-skirt without her permission. When she called to protest, furious, he told her flatly, "You're not an artist, baby. You're a commodity." Riley wore the outfit.
And Mrs. Taylor sure seems to use a lot of eye.
She won the award that night for Single of the Year, feeling humiliated the entire time. She never fully escaped that imposed image, but she never stopped working either, pivoting to gospel music by the late 1970s and remaining a genuinely trailblazing figure for how directly and how uncomfortably the industry once treated its female stars as products rather than artists.
And didn't even stop to play.
Number 7. Moe Bandy, Hank Williams, You Wrote My Life. Moe Bandy spent 12 straight years working as a sheet metal worker by day and singing in Texas honky-tonks by night before anyone outside San Antonio ever heard his name. Bandy grew up wanting to be a professional rodeo cowboy, competing in bronco and bull riding alongside his brother throughout his teenage years, before repeated injuries finally forced him out of the arena for good. Turning to music instead, he formed a band called Moe and the Mavericks, playing beer joints and honky-tonks across South Texas for over a decade, while supporting his family with a full-time job in his father's sheet metal shop. In 1972, Bandy met producer Ray Baker on a hunting trip and convinced him to listen to some demo tapes. There was just one catch. Baker would only produce him if Bandy paid for the session himself, so Bandy pawned his own furniture to scrape together the money. That gamble led to his first national hit in 1974. But it was 1975's Hank Williams' You Wrote My Life, a tribute built entirely around the titles of Hank Williams' own songs, that became his signature record, peaking at number 2 and cementing Bandy as one of the fiercest defenders of pure, uncompromising honky-tonk tradition.
We never met, I know.
At a moment when country radio was rapidly turning towards slicker, pop-oriented production, the sheet metal worker who pawned his furniture for one shot became one of traditional country's most respected torchbearers. Number 6. Charlie Rich, Behind Closed Doors.
Oh, don't she make me proud?
Charlie Rich had one of the greatest voices of his generation, soulful, jazz-inflected, capable of genuine crossover magic. And then, in a single televised moment, he set his own career on fire. Literally, Rich had spent years as a journeyman musician playing blues, jazz, and rockabilly before Nashville producer Billy Sherrill reshaped him into a smooth, string-laden country pop crossover artist.
My baby makes me proud.
The gamble worked spectacularly. 1973's Behind Closed Doors won Song of the Year and made Rich the CMA's Entertainer of the Year, an enormous late-career breakthrough for a musician then in his 40s. Then came October 13, 1975. As the reigning Entertainer of the Year, Rich was chosen to walk on stage at the live televised CMA Awards and announce that year's winner. Visibly impaired, his son later revealed Rich had broken his foot days earlier and was managing the pain with a mix of medication and alcohol.
Lord, don't they love to talk?
Rich opened the envelope, saw John Denver's name, pulled a cigarette lighter from his pocket, and calmly set the card on fire before announcing the winner through the flame. Rich was permanently banned from future CMA ceremonies. Whatever his intentions that night, real or accidental protest against country music going too pop, his career never fully recovered afterward.
Lord, don't they love to talk?
He continued recording for years, but never again matched the commercial heights he'd reached just before that single, unforgettable moment. One of the smoothest, most technically gifted voices in country music is remembered, unfairly, for the 3 seconds it took a card to burn.
Don't she make me smile?
Number 5. Tom T. Hall, the year Clayton Delaney died.
He got religion at the end, and I'm glad that he did.
Tom T. Hall earned the nickname The Storyteller by turning real, ordinary human lives into some of the most quietly devastating songs country music ever produced, and none more personal than this one.
Although I was a barefoot kid, they say
When Hall was around 8 years old growing up in Olive Hill, Kentucky, he idolized a local guitarist and singer named Lonnie Easterly, the first professional musician Hall had ever personally known. Easterly performed around town, and young Hall studied his playing obsessively, fascinated that Easterly always sang in his own natural voice, instead of copying whoever he was covering.
drank a lot, but I could never understand.
Easterly died of lung disease as a teenager, only 19 or 20 years old. More than a decade later, Hall, by then an established Nashville songwriter who'd already penned Harper Valley PTA for Jeannie C. sat down and wrote The Year Clayton Delaney Died, renaming his childhood hero, but keeping the emotional truth of losing him completely intact.
Now I know there's a lot of big preachers.
Released in July 1971, it became Hall's second #1 country hit, staying on the charts for 18 weeks. It's considered one of the finest examples of his signature gift, telling a complete, emotionally rich story about an entire human life and death in under 3 minutes, without a single wasted word.
Somehow, I'd give $100 if he could only.
Hall wrote hundreds of songs across his career. This one, built from an 8-year-old's memory of the man who first showed him what music could do, remains one of his most quietly powerful.
And Clayton used to tell me, son, you better put that old guitar.
Number 4. Sammi Smith, Help Me Make It Through the Night.
Come and lay down by my side.
Sammi Smith recorded one of the boldest vocal performances in country music history, a song 2 other singers had already rejected as too scandalous. Songwriter Kris Kristofferson wrote, Help Me Make It Through the Night, after reading a Frank Sinatra interview where Sinatra was asked what he believed in and replied, only half joking, booze, broads, or a Bible.
Like the shadow.
Kristofferson first offered the finished song to Dottie West, who turned it down for being too suggestive for a woman to sing. His own original recording, released in 1970, barely registered with audiences.
Through the night.
Sammi Smith felt completely differently. She saw nothing scandalous in a song about a woman openly choosing physical and emotional comfort on her own terms. In fact, she changed one small but crucial word in the opening line, shifting the entire perspective of the song to place the agency directly with the female narrator.
What's right or wrong?
Released in 1971, Smith's version shot to #1 on the country charts and climbed to #8 on the pop charts, earning her a Grammy for Best Female Country Vocal Performance, and Kristofferson his own first-ever Grammy for Best Country Song. Smith's version is still widely regarded as the definitive recording, outlasting cover versions by Elvis Presley, Willie Nelson, and dozens of others. A song 2 women turned down for being too bold became one woman's defining, fearless legacy.
Tonight, I need a friend.
Number 3. Johnny Paycheck, Take This Job and Shove It.
Ain't here no more. Well, I
Johnny Paycheck didn't write country music's most famous working-class anthem, but nobody else could have delivered it the way he did. Take This Job and Shove It was actually written by outlaw songwriter David Allan Coe, composed in about 5 minutes at producer Billy Sherrill's house after someone jokingly suggested Coe get a real job.
can't stop me, 'cause I'm walking out the door.
Coe tried pitching it to George Jones first, without success. Word of the song eventually reached Paycheck, who called Coe directly to ask permission to record it. despite Coe having no idea who Paycheck even was at the time. Paycheck, born Donald Eugene Lytle, had already spent years as a respected session player and sideman for artists like George Jones and Farron Young before rebuilding his own solo career at Epic Records.
Shove it. I ain't working here no more.
When he heard Coe's lyrics, he understood immediately why they'd work. His voice carried the rough, lived-in authenticity of a man who'd actually worked plenty of jobs he wanted to quit. Released in 1977, it became the first #1 country hit of 1978, spending 18 weeks on the charts and introducing a 4-word phrase into permanent American vernacular.
Take this job and shove it.
One so widely used today that plenty of people who say it have no idea it started as a country song at all. Ironically, when a national television host asked Paycheck who actually wrote the song, he brushed off the question, at one point crediting his own grandfather instead of David Allan Coe, a slight Coe reportedly never fully let go of.
Woman I love, she just left, boys. Took the reason I'm working.
Number 2, Dottie West, Country Sunshine.
But I was raised on country sunshine.
Dottie West broke down doors for every woman who followed her in country music, and her final act was rushing to a stage she'd played hundreds of times before. Born into rural poverty in Tennessee, one of 10 children, West became the first woman to win a Grammy in a country music category, taking home the honor in 1965 for Here Comes My Baby.
I'm happy with the simple things. I Saturday night.
Through the 1960s and 70s, she built a reputation not just as a hitmaker, but as a mentor and trailblazer, later scoring a run of major duet hits alongside Kenny Rogers, and becoming one of the most recognizable voices in the format through her own hit, Country Sunshine, a song so popular it was adapted into an award-winning Coca-Cola commercial.
Raised on country sunshine.
By the late 1980s, West faced serious financial hardship, including an IRS bankruptcy that cost her nearly everything she owned. Still, at 58 years old, she was actively planning a career comeback. On August 30th, 1991, West was on her way to perform at the Grand Ole Opry when her car, a gift from her old friend Kenny Rogers, given to her during her financial troubles, stalled on the road. An elderly neighbor offered her a ride, and rushing to get her to the stage on time, he lost control of the vehicle at high speed on an exit ramp. West was rushed into surgery for internal injuries and passed away several days later. She was posthumously inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame in 2018. Steve Wariner, who once played in her band as a teenager, put it simply, Dottie West knocked down doors for every woman in country music who came after her.
I'm happy with the simple things. A Saturday night.
Number 1. Johnny Rodriguez, Ridin' My Thumb to Mexico.
But the billboards on the highways and the brake.
Johnny Rodriguez became country music's first major Mexican-American superstar, and the entire thing started with a Texas Ranger overhearing him sing from inside a jail cell. In 1969, an 18-year-old Rodriguez found himself locked up in his hometown of Sabinal, Texas. The details vary depending on who tells the story, but he had no manager, no record deal, and no reason to believe his life was headed anywhere beyond the county line. To pass the time, he sang. Texas Ranger Joaquin Jackson happened to hear him. Struck by what he heard, Jackson mentioned the young singer to a local promoter named Happy Shahan, who ran a tourist attraction outside Brackettville called Alamo Village. Shahan gave Rodriguez a job performing for tourists, and it was there that country legend Tom T. Hall discovered him, hiring the 20-year-old to play guitar in his touring band.
Thumb to Mexico.
Rodriguez signed with Mercury Records shortly after. His debut single, Pass Me By, cracked the top 10. His follow-up, You Always Come Back, to Hurting Me, hit number 1 in 1973. Then came Ridin' My Thumb to Mexico, a song that leaned directly into his South Texas roots and Mexican-American identity, rather than asking him to hide it.
Been it all, that's where I'll go, so I'm riding my...
Helping make him one of the first country stars to bring that heritage directly into the center of Nashville's mainstream sound. Rodriguez would go on to score 6 #1 hits and 20 top 10 records across his career, becoming a genuine inspiration for the generation of Latino artists who followed, including George Strait, who later said Rodriguez gave him hope that a guy like me could succeed in the genre too. A teenager with nothing but a voice and a jail cell became one of the genre's most important and most quietly underrated trailblazers.
From Mexico.